Um, it's a bit of a strange creature, this. Because most of the time it's a single-cell organism, and then part of the time it's a multi-cell organism. And it turns out we can actually simulate this organism, at least part of it. So here we have a model, another model, and it's created by Stan Maré, who's also at our group, and Pauline Hogeweg and Nick Saville. And it's again based on the cellular POTS model, but this time without a gene network. And instead, only a few basic chemical reactions are simulated by a set of equations in the cell. And this mostly involves this molecule here, which is known as cyclic AMP, and it's used for lots of things, but in this organism it functions as a sort of a global signal molecule. And the reaction you see here is, it's mostly a feedback thing. And it reacts to, it produces cyclic AMP when it encounters cyclic AMP. So you can get all kinds of interesting things. And this reaction is influenced by temperature and by light, for instance. So this is a way for it to interact with the environment. And it turns out, if I start the simulation, that the amoeba start to excrete this substance when they can't find enough food. And then they go towards this substance and they form this mound. And it then crawls away, as you can see also in the simulation. And this crawling is actually caused by waves of this molecule, which go from the front to the back through the slug, and they create kind of pressure waves. You can also see there are 3 different cell types, and they are slowly being sorted as the organism moves. In a minute we should be able to see the pressure waves. Okay, this is an example of light influencing the organism. These same pressure waves cause some cells to be pushed down, and then the other thing to be pushed up, because action is minus reaction. And then in the end you only have these cells left, and they turn into spores. Here are the pressure waves again, and you can see it pushing down the other cells. So this is actually a 3-dimensional simulation for the most part. Bits of it are in 2D, but the graphics are not that impressive. But I was still quite impressed when I saw this for the first time. Five minutes, okay. I'm almost finished, so that's good. Okay. This model nicely shows that cooperation between cells and quite complex behavior. This is quite complex, having a thing crawl away and then forming into another thing. It can quite easily emerge from just a few basic physical and chemical processes. And for the rest, the interactions between the cells. And this is at multiple organization levels. You have the chemical reactions, you have the cells, you have the clumps of cells. And it also shows the importance of computer simulations for understanding these kinds of processes. because it's not enough to just study, for instance, just the cells or just the chemical reactions, because that still doesn't tell you how the organism works. Because most of the behavior is generated by the interactions and not by the parts themselves. And it's nice that in a computer you can just take a number of these processes and interactions and then simulate it and see what happens. Unfortunately, most biologists are not very good programmers, so simulations of this type are not very common. Also, people and scientists in particular, they don't really like complexity. They like to take things apart and see how it works, and then create nice, clean mathematical expressions for it. But yeah, it explains quite a lot, but not these kind of messy living behaviors. Well, a lot of time in biology and also in other fields like artificial life and things, people talk about survival of the fittest. But the problem is, what is the fittest? Is it the one that grows fastest? Or it can also, usually, it's also the one that doesn't die first, when the environment becomes a bit different. And the environment becomes different all the time because it's also created by the organisms around you. So basically, real organisms are in local optima most of the time. And that's also the reason why real organisms get not only selected for growth, but also for diversity and for robustness against change. Well, this is called a fitness landscape. You see them a lot in evolutionary theory. But actual fitness landscapes are more like fitness seascapes. They change all the time, and the change is also dependent on interactions. So, well, evolution has to work with what's available. So it never gets to the global optimum, which is just as well, because well, an optimal world would be a little bit boring, I think. You would have only one species, would be good at everything, and would be very bored because sex wouldn't exist, because that would be a waste of energy. Luckily, we don't live in an optimal world. We live in a messy world and a complex world. And, well, evolution is basically driven by accumulating levels of complexity and of organization and of information. And, well, this complexity creates then further complexity, because every new development creates lots of possibilities for other developments. And this, well, this positive feedback loop of invention, it makes that evolution is actually speeding up. It took over, well, you can see, over 2 billion years to get the first modern biological cells, and only about half a billion years to get multicellular organisms, and then well, animals, land plants, etc. evolved within about 500 million years. And of course, well, the same goes for society. It took us a long time to get from apes to, well, to invent language, and then we formed more complicated social structures, invented agriculture, invented writing, and then things sort of started exploding because of the accumulated knowledge. So it's basically the same process. And it's all driven, of course, by a steady supply of energy. And we don't know where it ends, basically. As you've seen what the introduction of computers has done. It's greatly increased storage and communication. So it's another level in the evolutionary story. I do know that it's important to gain a better understanding of these, especially the things I told you about, the role of energy, feedback mechanisms, self-replication, and well, the levels of organization and the interactions between them. And these occur not only, because these processes occur not only in living systems. Well, it's interesting to see that you get the same kind of patterns in all kinds of systems. For instance, economic systems and social systems all show complex networks of things that interact, and they all show the same kind of behavior. So I would say it's time we started looking a bit more at the interactions and started looking a bit more at well, trying to simulate things. And I hope I've been able to show that to you. And I thank you for your attention. Other questions?
We maybe have time for just a few quick questions, but we do need to prepare the room for the next talk. So, anybody has any questions? Okay then.